Hi, my name is Graham Quinn, and I'm going to show you how you can change the clutch in your Subaru Legacy without spending $700–800 in labor at the dealership. And here's our patient today, my 2005 Subaru Legacy GT. Over the last couple of weeks I've been having some noise coming from the transmission area, and what's been happening is start the car first thing in the morning, and as I press the clutch I start to get some very light whirring, scraping sounds. Not quite a grinding or a squealing yet, but after doing some research on legacygt.com I found out that this is only the beginning. From here it goes to the grinding, the squealing, and eventually it's going to break the snout right off the front of the transmission if I don't deal with it right away. So I have 62,500 miles on this car, which is it's not ideal for having to replace the clutch, but might as well replace the clutch while I'm in there replacing the throwout bearing. Now, because I'm not having to replace the clutch because the clutch itself is bad, I'm not planning on replacing the flywheel. What I'm going to do is I'm going to inspect the flywheel and see if I can reuse it. While I'm in there though, I will be replacing the clutch, pressure plate and friction plate, along with, of course, the throwout bearing. There are a couple different techniques for this, but the one that I've settled on is to move the transmission backwards by about 8 inches by disconnecting the rear drive shaft and providing clearance by removing the exhaust. Now, I could have moved the engine forward, but I chose not to do this because it involves me breaking into too many sealed systems like the power steering and the cooling system, and every system you break open is just another system that could potentially leak if you don't put it back together right. So for me it's going to be the transmission method.
Start by isolating the battery by disconnecting the negative lead. Remove the 4 plastic rivets and then take off the engine cover. Loosen the intercooler. There are 2 bolts on the left side and 2 on the right. Remove the spring clip and then remove the hose. Remove the clamp around the large intake hose just off the intercooler. And then carefully remove the intercooler. Cover the turbo to stop anything from falling in. Remove the electrical connectors. Then remove the transmission dipstick and cover the hole. Remove the 2 14mm bolts that hold the clutch slave cylinder. Remove the cylinder and set it aside, and then put the bolts back in the holes to keep them safe. Remove the negative lead from the starter motor. Remove the positive lead and the solenoid input. Remove the starter motor bolts, and finally remove the starter motor itself. Put the car up on 4 solid jack stands and remove the front wheels. Never work under a car which is supported only by a jack. Disconnect the pitch stop arm. Remove the 6 turbo heat shield bolts and remove the heat shield itself. Remove the 5 bolts that hold the turbo outlet to the downpipe. Disconnect the bolts between the downpipe and the midpipe. Disconnect both of the center downpipe supports. Then remove the downpipe and set it aside. Remove the mid-pipe heat shield bolts and remove the heat shield, set it aside. Loosen the center prop shaft support, but leave the bolts in a couple of turns to support the prop shaft. Remove the rear prop shaft bolts at the rear differential. It helps to turn the rear wheel to help rotate the prop shaft around to the next bolt. These bolts are very tight, so you need to put a lot of force in them. Remove the center prop shaft support bolts finally, and then pull the prop shaft slightly rearward to disengage from the transmission, and then drop it forward and out, and then set the prop shaft aside. Disconnect the shifter linkage support rod then disconnect the linkage control. Remove the transmission subframe then remove all of the bell housing bolts. You may also choose to disconnect the lower ball joints and drive shafts if you need more clearance. Now it's time to start separating the engine from the transmission. Carefully pry the transmission away, bearing in mind that the turbo clearance is an issue. Remove the clutch bolts evenly, and then you can remove the friction plate and pressure plates together